Hi, my name's Dave Annell. Welcome to episode 24 of Setting the Record Straight. It's been a while since I got up on my soapbox and had a good rant, so let's put that right. About 5 years ago now, I coined a word to describe the sort of research that you see all too often these days, where people have clearly added ancestors to their online family trees simply by accepting someone else's research. I use the word research, but of course it doesn't involve any research at all, which is why I called it no search. I was delighted when Australian genealogist Jill Ball added it to her online gene dictionary. I've now come up with another term for it. It seems that people are simply shopping for ancestors, so perhaps click and collect works better. A few days ago, I went onto the Family Search website to look up a few things, and I was horrified to be confronted by this. I read it once, I read it again, and eventually my brain accepted the horrible truth that it actually did say what I thought it said. Find records without searching. I hardly know where to start, and I could have a good rant about several aspects of this concept, but for sake of brevity and my own sanity, I'll just focus on one of them today. The idea that finding records is so easy that it's something that a clever computer system, even with the most sophisticated algorithms, can do better than a human brain. You see, family history research isn't easy. Yes, I know I wrote a book called Easy Family History, but in my defense, I was given the title by the publishers and asked to write the book, and I was young and just starting out as an author. Anyway, it's my considered opinion that to carry out family history research successfully, you need to understand the principles of evidence-based research, the sort of principles expounded by pioneering researchers like George Redmond's. The hints and suggestions that you get on Ancestry and the other big genealogical databases are based on names. But as Redmond's explained so expertly in his seminal book, Surnames and Genealogy, A New Approach, our ancestors' names are not reliable. There are any number of reasons why someone might be known by more than one name throughout the course of their life. I want to share a case study I worked on recently where accepting and understanding this was the key to solving a tricky problem. Allow me to introduce you to a man called John William Davis. Davis is, of course, not a great name to work with, but John William was remarkably consistent with the evidence that he left behind. Here he is in the 1939 National Register, giving his date of birth as 5th of February, 1868. And here he is in the 1921 census, 53 years and 4 months old. The census was taken in June 1921, so this is good. And in 1911, where he's listed as 43. His birthplace is consistently given as Liverpool. This is the Davis family in the 1901 census. Again, the age, 33, is spot on for a birth date of 5th of February 1868. And again, he was born in Liverpool. And here we have John William's marriage to Elizabeth Neal on the 1st of February 1892. He claims to be 24, but in fact he was a few days short of his 24th birthday. He named his father as James Davis, an engineer, deceased. And that's where I bumped into the brick wall. Lots of really good consistent information, but I couldn't find him in earlier censuses. I couldn't find any evidence of the existence of a James Davis who fit the bill, and I couldn't find any record of the birth or baptism of a John William Davis in the Liverpool area anytime around 1868. I tried a number of things, but eventually I settled on a method that I've used a few times before to good effect. I was as confident as I could be that John William was genuinely born on the 5th of February 1868 and that he was genuinely born in Liverpool. I rejected the idea that since he was born before 1875 his birth probably wasn't registered, because the myth that until then it wasn't compulsory to register births is one that I believe I've thoroughly debunked. So I did a search for anyone called John William whose birth was registered in the March quarter of 1868 in the Liverpool or West Derby districts. Births were supposed to be registered within 6 weeks of the event, so even allowing for a deadline day registration, we're still well before the end of March. So this should capture any births on the 5th of February. And I was pleased to see that there were only 14 hits. And after copying and pasting them into a spreadsheet, I began the task of attempting to eliminate them one at a time. I was looking for infant deaths or strong evidence that they had survived to adulthood and had clearly mapped out futures that precluded them from being our John William. I was looking for baptismal records that recorded the date of birth. If they weren't born on the 5th of February, again, they weren't our man. I'd got over halfway through the list. I'd eliminated 9 John Williams from our inquiries when I came to John William Simon. And I couldn't find any later reference to him, no death or marriage, and no obvious sign of him in the census. Now that you can get digital images of most Euro death certificates at the knockdown price of just £2.50, with the added bonus of instant delivery, that gave me the confidence to buy. And a minute or so later, I was looking at a digital scan of the birth certificate of John William Simon, the illegitimate son of Mary Simon. And guess what? He was born on the 5th of February, 1868. Of course, this in itself isn't evidence that we've got the right person, although the odds are astronomically in our favour. I still needed to find compelling evidence to support my theory that this was the birth certificate of our John William, who later went by the name Davis. Initial searches were inconclusive. I couldn't find any evidence of Mary Simon marrying a James Davis, or indeed anyone called Davis, or anyone else for that matter. I couldn't find any entirely convincing entries for Mary and John William in the 1871 or 1881 censuses. There were a few possible sightings, but nothing that I could be certain about. So I expanded the search and tried to find out everything I could about John William's later life, looking for that vital clue. And I found it. I'd already got the baptismal records for each of John William and Elizabeth's 4 children. John William was consistently an engineer of some sort, but it was only when I got their birth certificates, again at £2.50 ago, it was money well spent, and saw that at the time of the birth of his first son, William Alfred, father's occupation was given as engineer on a steam vessel. From the 1860s, engineers in the merchant service were required to have qualifications. They could either qualify through their proven experience and be granted a certificate of service, or they would need to pass an exam to gain their certificate of competency. The relevant registers are held by the National Archives, and I was able to find a record for John William Davis, which crucially gave his certificate number. I was then able to contact the National Maritime Museum, who hold the certificates themselves, along with the accompanying application forms, and a week or so later, I received a nice big digital file containing all the paperwork, including John Williams' certificate of competency, first class, and a form which included some vital information. First of all, it confirmed his date and place of birth, 5th of February 1868, Liverpool, but it also gave me an address, 13 Schomburg Street. I was then able to look up that address on the 1891 census, and I found a family called Price, along with a 50-year-old widowed lodger called Mary E. Davis, undoubtedly John William's mother. And Mary's place of birth was given as Mostyn in Flintshire. And it didn't take me long then to find the birth of Mary Simon, no middle name, but her mother was called Ellen, in Mostyn in June 1840, a perfect match with a person who we know to have been John William's mother. And Mostyn is a very small place. It was a hard slog, but I was happy that I'd joined all the dots and that the links were all good. I'd used rigorous, evidence-based research to solve a very tricky problem and to break down a brick wall. I often get asked what I feel about the future of genealogy, and while I don't want to sound too negative and cynical about it, I do fear that as the focus shifts more and more towards hints and suggestions and reliance on other people's research, it's heading in a dangerous direction. What we really need to do is to encourage evidence-based research. It's harder than the click and collect alternative, but it's much more likely to result in successful outcomes. But as the sheer volume of online family trees expands and starts to smother the actual source material, it's getting increasingly difficult for us to see the truth for the trees. Thanks for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode of Setting the Record Straight.